The first weave is going to be a two-color weave, and for this we're going to be able to use one of the colors is going to be solid on the top and then be cut into 1/8 of an inch strips, and then some individually cut pieces of the opposite color. Before I begin weaving, I'm going to mark out how I want my design to work. So one thing I want to be sure of is that I know where the center of the design is. So there's 15 squares by 15 squares, so I counted up 8 to the center and then counted over 8, and then I find my middle square, which I'm going to fill in with the blue, and continue with my design. So here's my finished design, and note that it uses a bilateral symmetry. So since I started in the center and moved out, the two halves, so this half should be a mirror image of this half, and likewise this half should be a mirror image of this half, but they can be slightly different from top to bottom, side to side. I have my design, then I'm ready to start working with the color aid. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these into 1/8 inch strips. So rather than measure it out, I'm going to use the guides on the cutting board to pick up every 1/8 of an inch. So there are guides on the top side of the cutting board and the bottom. So you need a ruler that's long enough, and you need to cut this widthwise so that you can line up the top part of my ruler with this 1/8 inch mark. And down here on the bottom, I'm going to line my ruler up with the other 1/8 inch part. And then I'm going to leave about 1/2 an inch from the top and start cutting down in strips. And then I'll move this over 1/8 of an inch and also line it up with the bottom. And always make sure that the paper actually got cut. So before you take your hand off the ruler, just gently feel that it has separated. If not, you want to make your second cut before you move the ruler. And then one thing to keep in mind as you're cutting this is that this is 2 inches. So if you're cutting 1/8 of an inch times 2 inches, you're going to end up with 16 pieces. So since our square is going to be 15 inches by 15, there's going to be 1/8 inch piece at the end that you're going to have to take off. And I cut my blue pieces the same way, except that I cut all the way from top to bottom. I'm going to use this as a guide to help me with my actual weaving. So I'm actually going to lift this up, put it next to this. And then it works like a set of instructions line by line. So I know the blue is going to go on top of the first 2, and then it's going to skip 2, and then there's going to be 1 on top. So sometimes I weave it in and out, sometimes I try to do it from the bottom if possible. I find that a little bit easier. And then I'm going to be doing every other one. I created a new system for threading this underneath. Instead of starting at the bottom, what I'm doing is pushing up the elements that I want to go on top. And then once I've got that completely woven, I'm going to take the strip and pull it up from both sides. And now that I've reached the halfway point, it's time to tighten up these rows. So you're going to need some kind of instrument to help you. I like this. This is a clay sculpting tool. I like it because it has a really nice point, but it's plastic and it's not something metal or the X-Acto knife. It's going to cut or damage the paper. You can also use a bone folder if you have one of those. The tip's not quite as pointy, so it's a little bit more difficult, but you can manage with that. So if it gets a little bit stubborn, it's probably because you have like little single pieces going across. So you can go ahead and flip this over and work on the other side and pull it up from there. I want to take some of the removable tape and curl one end of it so that you have a tab on it that you can pull up, and then you can either go from the center, I went from the center to this side, and now I'm doing the last side, and I'm just checking on the edges here that these line up, and then I'm going to use the removable tape just to hold that down. And then I should have a fairly tight design that should resemble the first half of my handmade pattern template. And then this is the centerpiece, so then from here on out I'm doing the mirror image of what I did before.